Hey, I'm Julianna Spose. I'm 27 and I have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I'm going to share my diagnostic journey and my neurological complications that have arisen. Okay. So since birth, I have had hypermobile with a Baton scale of 7 out of 9. And I've also had slow motility and IBS-C. I struggled with some undiagnosed mild POTS symptoms and vasovagal syncope during my childhood. But otherwise, I was a largely healthy individual until I was the age of 11. And my family is also largely healthy with varying ranges of hypermobility and POTS in my extended family. But they actually were completely unaware of Ehlers-Danlos until this past year with my diagnosis. So these are my current diagnoses, except that my craniocervical instability and my tethered cord have been surgically treated, and my MCAS is suspected and not officially diagnosed. So in the spring of, in the fall of October 2006, I was 11 and I developed severe Epstein-Barr virus, and I was out of school for the rest of the year. I was so weak that I was wheelchair bound with liver and kidney inflammation, and I was diagnosed with ME/CFS that spring, 2007, and slowly regained strength enough to return to school in the fall of 2007. Between the fall of 2007 and January of 2016, so almost 10 years, I was healthy other than requiring more rest than my peers. It wasn't until after I became ill again in 2016 that I reflected on that healthy period of time and became aware that it seemed like I was in some sort of remission. Then in January 2016, I was a junior in college, and that's what I kind of refer to as my health crisis. Prior to my crash, this health crisis, I was in college at the time, double majoring. I was overworking and partying too much. I was undersleeping and overall not taking care of myself. When I had my health crisis, I experienced severe fatigue, muscle and joint pain, nausea and heart palpitations, depression, and even suicidal ideation, which I had never experienced before, as well as a slew of other physical symptoms that were so severe that I wasn't able to physically attend class for weeks. I went to a series of doctor's appointments that spring and summer who found that I had a reactivation of viruses. I also had an elevated ANA, but that was unexplainable. I had leaky gut and multiple food sensitivities, but otherwise they couldn't find anything else that was wrong with me. I also had many doctors claim that my symptoms were psychosomatic, which was, of course, traumatizing, and I'm not the only one. I'm sure that has been told that. Then in July of 2016, I was re-diagnosed with ME/CFS. And between January 2016 and the spring of 2017, I developed more unexplainable symptoms like scalp lesions, worsening headaches and brain fog, and cognitive dysfunction. And then during this time period, my health was steadily declining, but my professors were extremely accommodating, and I was actually able to graduate on time, except fortunately, I never was able to walk across the stage at graduation because I had a POTS attack and fainted due to the heat. By the time I graduated, I was too ill to work, but I was offered a scholarship with the Master's in Education department. And because the education department was so flexible in the past, I chose to continue my studies and extend the program only by 1 semester. And then in 2019, which is what I think threw me over the edge, I began a half-day teaching position and that fall, my health declined very significantly. As COVID-19 hit, I transitioned to online teaching twice a week and was therefore better able to take care of my health. But because of the fall of 2019, I had pushed myself so significantly that at that point, my health had been declining just too significantly. Then in 2019, I had my first myoclonus seizure. While I was conscious, I lost the ability to speak and I had severe cognitive dysfunction. I also had an EEG after that experience. And during the EEG, during the light flashing portion, I entered another seizure. And I had severe decline in cognition, inability to speak, and seizing. So I continue to have that during up till today. And simple triggers are flashing lights on bikes, movement on TV, and even scrolling on a computer or a phone for too long, and sometimes even just lying in bed and seeing the fan go around is a trigger for me. So the report on my EEG saw no abnormal brain activity and claimed it was a psychosomatic or a childhood trauma that caused those seizures. Except that my ME/CFS specialist believed it was hyperreactivity response. And now I know that sensory sensitivity is also common. So by July of 2019, I was officially diagnosed with hyperadrenergic POTS and continued to have worsening sensory sensitivity, the myoclonus seizures, and severe cognitive dysfunction, as well as loss of speech with these. I also had unexplained rashes that now I understand to be MCAS. And at this point, I was largely unable to work except for tutoring once or twice a week. So that fall, I came across articles by Jen Brea and Jeffrey Wood in the ME/CFS community, which led me to look into cervical instability. And all along, I had been told by my ME/CFS specialists that they also thought that I had this thing called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and they had been doing the Baton mobility scale on me. But I didn't really, I just kind of added it to my slew of other diagnoses. So it wasn't until this moment that I took my scans to Dr. Fraser Henderson and was diagnosed with craniocervical instability and atlantoaxial instability. And then 1 month later, January 2021, I underwent my cervical fusion. Then weeks after my surgery, my symptoms of bladder problems, leg pain, sexual numbness worsened dramatically. And Dr. Henderson recommended that I undergo testing to determine if I had a neurogenic bladder, as well as an MRI and other testing that goes along with tethered cord syndrome. Then on February 2021, I underwent the surgery for the sectioning of the filium terminale to address my tethered cord syndrome. And while many of my tethered cord symptoms went away, 1 week later, I needed an emergency dural repair due to a cerebrospinal fluid leak and a very severe spinal infection. August 28th marked my 6th month since my last surgery, which I'm very excited about. And then finally, I was diagnosed officially by my geneticist in April 2021. And though I have the TNXB gene mutation, which usually corresponds with the classic like Ehlers-Danlos, I lack the severe hypertrophic scarring. And I also have the comorbidities that tend to go along with hypermobile subtype. And so I was diagnosed with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos. Now, currently, my main symptoms are sensory sensitivity, brain fog, heart palpitations, racing adrenaline, fatigue, muscle and joint pain, of course, along with my myoclonus seizures and MCAS, though the myoclonus is absolutely starting to reduce. Now, since my surgeries, I've been recovering and undergoing an adapted modality protocol. And while I'm not seeing exponential growth in my health, my husband likes to say that I am trending upwards. And I agree that I'm definitely seeing results. So the last thing that I want to say is just thank you for listening. And I hope that my journey has shared a little bit of light, shed a little light, and that you can relate. And maybe there are some things that draw attention to you that maybe you want to look into in your own diagnosis. So stay strong and listen to your bodies, my fellow zebras. Thank you.